Well, thank you so much, everybody. It is really awesome to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. Thank you to Vanessa as well, who is responsible for this whole link up between us all too. So I appreciate that. And today we've got a session for you on demystifying DevOps. So my name is Jack McCurdy. I am DevOps advocate at GearSet. So over the last 3 years or so, I've been helping folks in the Salesforce ecosystem assess their processes about how they deliver Salesforce on the platform. So not so much around how you build certain things or write pieces of Apex or what should I do about this profile and its permissions and all that kind of stuff. As Justin was kind of just describing there, my job is much more around how can I help Salesforce customers, Salesforce admins, BAs, architects, developers, whichever path you might end up going down as a talent stacker. How can we help you get all that lovely stuff that you build into your end user's hands a little bit faster? So that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years, working with teams of all shapes and sizes to help them on that journey and streamline those things. I did that in commercial roles in GearSet, so I mainly sat within a sales team, which is a little bit different to your average sales team, a lot more consultative, a lot more around POCs and all that kind of stuff. So plenty of experience helping people build those things, as well as then ultimately selling to them before moving into my role now, which is getting into the community as much as possible and trying to build a community that's really invested in those best practices and really wants to excel in what they're doing, and using DevOps as a way that they can do that so they can actually focus on the things that they want to be focusing on. Outside of work, you'll probably find me on a golf course. So, and if you like doing that and see me at an event and then want to go play, then hit me up. And I also have 2 kids, which I've just put to bed as well. So if you hear some kind of distant screaming or crying, they're fine, I promise. That is that's a little bit about me. Little bit about GearSet, the company I work for. So we are DevOps solutions. So all the challenges that you might face when it comes to migrating configuration and changes and all those nice things that you've built, we're a platform that helps solve that, as well as helps back up and recover in the event of disaster recovery. This isn't a sales pitch, but that's who we are. If you want to know a little bit more, head over to gearset.com and you can find out a little bit more about us. So in terms of our agenda today, we're looking to understand at the end of the session, or hopefully understand by the end of the session, why we're hearing more about DevOps as a topic. So I appreciate that a lot of the group here are going to be fairly new to the space and already have a lot of things to wrap your head around. But before long, if it isn't already, DevOps is going to come into the fray. So we'll help you understand a little bit more about why you're hearing more about it and why it's important, and what DevOps is, what's actually involved in DevOps, what are the component parts that make up DevOps processes, and what you might be able to do when it comes to implementations for your organizations that you end up working for or already work for, and what success looks like in that realm. We'll also give you some resources and point you in the right direction if you want to find out a little bit more about this space. So in the chat, anybody, has anybody heard of DevOps before? Already doing DevOps? Justin's had some serious pain about DevOps already, but has anybody heard of DevOps? A no is fine. Yes is fine. Yes is great, but a no is fine too. Or dead silence is also cool. I'm fine with that too. Yes, we got lots of yeses. Yes, 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 cool. Lots of yeses. So a lot of Jenna says no. Cool. All right, so a little bit of a mixed bag. So most people in this space have heard about DevOps usually for one of 2 reasons. So the reason that a lot of people have heard about it is exactly what, so I was going to tell a similar story to what Justin's already told, but Justin's just told us that last night he was up at 3 a.m. trying to deploy configuration into production, feeling a little bit tired this morning. I can't see a vat of coffee next to him, but I imagine there's one sitting there somewhere. When it comes to deploying configuration and changes and all that lovely stuff that you've made for your end users into production, that can be quite challenging. So that is what DevOps is all about. It's about streamlining that process of how you get those changes to your end users through whatever development lifecycle strategy your company has. So I'm sure you've heard of sandboxes. It's about how do we get the changes that we might be making in those sandboxes and sequence of sandboxes right to the end. That can be significantly challenging. So if any of you are familiar with that image in the bottom right-hand corner there, that is fairly common in this space. Failed deployments, unpicking them and rectifying those challenges are significant. We also have Salesforce DevOps Center, that big icon in the middle, which is Salesforce's, in my view and in my world, the most hotly anticipated release that Salesforce has had on the cards for a long time. That's coming into the fray, and you'll probably hear a lot more about that if you attend any community conferences or any of Salesforce's world tours, or if you're lucky enough to attend Dreamforce this year as well, you'll probably hear a lot about that too. If you've been looking at certification tracks and places that you might want to take your Salesforce career, you have Development Lifecycle and Deployment Designer certification, which is becoming more and more popular these days as well. And that's what DevOps is all about. So there's plenty of angles and plenty of resources throughout the ecosystem that is driving us towards this and getting us all to think a little bit more about it. But the crux of the matter is that Salesforce development and deployment can be quite challenging. So it's a universal problem on the platform that a lot of people look to streamline and look to make their lives a little bit easier, whether that's via tooling like GearSet or whether they have processes that they want to build themselves. So that's why we're hearing a little bit more about it, and why you'll likely hear about it a little bit more as you continue your path of learning in this space. So what is it and what isn't it? So DevOps is quite literally the smishing together of development and operations. And that in itself lends itself to misconceptions. And there's a lot of misconceptions in the space about what DevOps is and what it isn't really. So when you think about development, a lot of people go, DevOps is for developers. I'm not a developer. I want to be an admin, or I want to be a BA, or what have you. That's not for me. And that's not the case. So DevOps involves everybody that's involved in the life cycle of Salesforce development and building those things. People like Vanessa here are going to have to consider what DevOps means for the business as they're looking to implement their solutions and how that impacts the end users. Developers are going to be thinking about it because, yes, it is ultimately originated with developers in traditional software development, so they're going to understand more of the concepts and what have you. But they're looking, those modern development practices that have been bleeding into Salesforce while slightly leaving the clicks not code thing behind, which is now coming back in a big way in Salesforce with all the new flows and Salesforce really going all in on that. It's not just for the developers and that traditional stream. Admins need to be involved, and DevOps can be a whole career in Salesforce in itself. So you have release managers sometimes, especially in larger enterprise organizations, that are responsible for this whole process and responsible how things work through. But it's not just for those big teams. You know, you can do yourself a lot of favors, even if you're just a solo admin in a small org, if you really put some time and effort into streamlining that process yourself and making your life a little bit easier. Another big misconception about DevOps is that it's a specific set of tools. So those of us that have heard of DevOps before might think, oh, DevOps is Git or GitHub, GitLab, you know, any one of those things. It's an automation platform. It's this, that, or the other. And that's not the case either. DevOps is really about the holistic way of delivering software in most smooth and streamlined ways possible. So those are a few of the big ones. And I'm going to switch to a slide here that illustrates it from a technology standpoint and a delivery standpoint a little bit better. It can look a little bit scary. So probably looking at this and thinking, oh, that's a bit confusing. You know, that picture on the right hand side. What is Git? What's an automation platform? And what does it involve? But what we're really trying to illustrate here is the difference between how things get done traditionally between developers and configurators and operations teams. You often find that in an organization, you'll have an ops team that will have features that have been created, handed over to them, and you say to them, this is what we've built, now you go and deploy it. So that's what happens traditionally. So if I can get a pointer out here, if I remember how to do it. Turn on the laser pointer. So traditionally what we have here, we have developers and admins making those changes, building those user stories, building those features in their sandboxes. And then what they do is they'll package it up, maybe in an Excel spreadsheet, maybe some other way, or even build the change set themselves. And then what they'll do is they'll hand that off to an operations team, which will then be responsible for deploying it. Now, that has one main drawback, is that this requires a lot of communication and a lot of smooth communication between teams. Now, I know we all live in the digital age, and Slack and Microsoft Teams is all the rage these days, and communication should be simple and should be easy. But I'm sure I'd love to have like a hands raised button, or have a live audience here, say show of hands who's ever been personally victimized by poor communication on any of these digital channels, because yeah, that's me, that's everybody. That has that one main drawback, is working in a way like this with your dev on the left hand side and the operation. Anthony raises both hands. Of course, with your developers and configurators on the left hand side, isolated from operations, who then deliver those configurations, the communication can break down really quickly. What if one little tweak needs made? What if something fails some testing? So I'm not sure how widely testing is kind of being covered for you all so far, or how much you've dug into it, aside from maybe unit testing and what have you. What if those kind of tests and those best practices that might also be covering in already, how are they impacted? So that back and forth constant communication between these two separate teams, those silos can really affect how quickly things can be delivered, which makes your end users grumpy. We don't really want to be making end users grumpy, because then the business gets grumpy. So how can we streamline this? And that's where DevOps come into the picture. So Vanessa's, there should even be a box on the left that shows how features are packaged and deployed by a user story. Yes, there should. But when we move to a DevOps model, what we do here is, rather than having those two separate teams, what we do is we put all our configurators, developers, etc., down here responsible for their own changes. DevOps traditionally involves a Git platform. That's one of the big talking things, and what is widely considered to be the core pillar of any DevOps process. That system that allows them to track and manage their own changes, and puts that responsibility for deployment and for moving those changes through that platform onto each individual person. So rather than having this gated process, rather than having this constant communication or lack of communication and breakdown of communication, what you have is each person being responsible for them moving that through right to wherever it needs to be. So integration here, if you have a slightly more expanded workflow, or right into production there as well. So you have Git and an automation platform, which more advanced teams, as they look to extend their maturity, are involved with. But because you kick all of that responsibility back right down to the individual that's responsible for the feature, and get everybody bought into that way of working, you eliminate that siloed communications. Now, I'm not going to deep dive into all the problems that might potentially arise with that, but that's the idea, and that's what we're really looking for, is like a utopia between everybody, by combining everybody and have everybody working towards a common goal that is shared and everybody's involved in. So what's involved in building a DevOps process, and what constitutes DevOps? So there's two sides to every story, right? So here, nicely illustrated, we have a pilot and his fighter jet. So we have some of the most advanced bit of technology on the planet in this picture, and we have the most advanced person on the planet, or one of the most advanced person with a lot of skills on the planet here as well. So, and the same is true for DevOps. So this is why I like to use this analogy. So there might be quite a heavy focus on technology, and you'll probably see quite a lot in the early part of your career is people will talk about technology quite a lot, and technology being the be all and the end all, and you can have all the bells and whistles on this fighter jet. You know, this isn't like Spitfire from World War II. You know, this is truly the most cutting edge technology that's available to us right now. And ultimately, DevOps does solve a fairly technical problem. So advanced fighter jet, we absolutely want an advanced fighter jet in our wheelhouse. So we do want that. But the other side of DevOps, and anything that you could potentially argue, is the cultural side of things. So we might have the best technology in the world. We might have the F-22, we might have whatever it is at our disposal. But unless we have a team that is engaged, trained, and invested in how best to use that technology in the way that you need it to be used, you know, the technology is ultimately useless. So building a culture that is invested in why you do DevOps and why everybody should be invested in it across the team is the second part of the equation. And arguably for me, I spent a lot of my career and a lot of my time at the company helping teams overcome those kind of cultural challenges and getting people invested in it, rather than just buying gear set and sending them on their merry way. Is helping those teams utilize their people and enable a culture that is actually going to make them successful with the technology that they have in their hands. What's the pushback to what, Vanessa?
Like the pushback to, like you said, it's hard to get people on board as far as getting the culture together on your team. So what are some of the issues why people wouldn't be on board with a DevOps process, or some of the challenges that there might be getting a team all together around that?
Yeah, for sure. So the biggest one that we find typically is that to implement a DevOps process, especially one that a company might be standing up on their own by using their own stack of technologies, or even buying a tool like GearSet or the other ones that are out there, is very often it's perceived that it's drop everything and focus on this thing so that we can do it kind of task. And the perception is that that can take a month, 2 months, 3 months, typically, whatever it might be. And that diversion of resources is better spent, you know, doing business as usual. You know, everybody will always have a project that they're working on, some deliverable, some timeline. So that tends to be the biggest blocker. So what if we take our foot off the gas on all those other things? We don't have the time to implement DevOps, when DevOps is actually going to save us a ton of time in the future through wasted time, effort, or what it is. Yes, there is going to be a little bit of a learning curve, and largely that can be solved through effective planning and effective training, like any project or anything that you're implementing. CPQ, for example, as another example, you don't just build CPQ and then deploy it out to everyone. You might phase it to power users and then to other people, and DevOps is much the same. And the big thing about DevOps is because it's still new to Salesforce. So DevOps as a concept has been around for the best part of 15 years or so on other platforms. So the challenges are well understood more generally in the software industry, but it's new to Salesforce, which means the business users don't really understand, or the senior stakeholders that are responsible for signing off on DevOps or DevOps initiatives don't really understand the value, and they don't understand the metrics that they need to track and can benchmark themselves against. So that tends to be the biggest challenges that you typically see in this space when it comes to adopting those things. But as I was just saying there, about 15 years or so, you've had DevOps as a concept, which means that there is plenty that we can learn from, in particular the cultural challenges, and they're almost identical regardless of the platform. Anita, yes, but we've always done it this way. That is the pain. So that inertia, we're going to come onto that in just a bit. Learning curve time, huge bit of pushback. Justin, do you use a particular tool or?
Yeah, we're a GearSet client, and I was here a couple of years ago when we launched GearSet to the team. And I definitely saw that. The way pushback sounded on our team was, well, let's just get it in the way we used to do it and get that up into production. And our senior developers were kind of pushing back, saying, no, we need to learn this new process. We need to do it this way so we can be consistent with how we're deploying to our production org. And that creates that kind of tension between speed and the learning curve of learning this technology or this new way of doing things. And so it was about 6 to 8 months where developers are learning, they're teaching the rest of the development team. We need to use a source repository of code. That's what Git was on that previous diagram, and understanding branching strategies and stuff was completely foreign to most of us. And that took some time.
Yeah, for sure. You say GearSet customer for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years or so. Yeah, for sure. And that's something that GearSet has invested a lot in over the last 3 years or so, is how we help customers implement and help them get into a phase strategy and really stop people running before they walk and all that kind of stuff. It's something that can be, it's a constant iterative thing. DevOps is all about continual improvement and getting changes into production faster. And, so it's very core. Any process can be continually improved. So that's something that we've tried a lot over the last 3 years to kind of ingrain into customers. And when I speak about it, it's, consistent change, make positive change initially and build on it. So, but you're right, it does come with significant challenges. I feel like we're going to scare everybody in this talk right now. DevOps is this big scary thing. It's really not that scary, I promise you all. But it'd be careless to not acknowledge some of those challenges for sure. So from the technical standpoint, here's a few of the things that DevOps involves, and a few of the things that you can do to streamline that overall DevOps process and that delivery process. So automated unit testing. So some of you may be familiar already with every production org has to have 75% code coverage for your custom Apex that's being deployed in there. So that's kind of the first level. If you can start to automate part of that process and make sure that nothing's failing in that respect, then when it comes to deployment time, you don't have like a nasty shock. So automating those side of things can be really helpful when it comes to just that basic level and having a little bit more visibility into what's going on. Version control, Justin's just touched on this for us when he spoke about branching strategies, etc. So version control gives us a lot of benefit. So this is the big one I mentioned earlier, that widely perceived to be the core pillar. And that's because of the core things that it allows us to do. So by introducing version control, what that allows us to do as admins, developers, etc., is it allows us to work safely on our features in isolation from everybody else. So some of you may, in your organizations, work in a shared sandbox where you have 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe more, I don't know, people working in that org on configuration changes. Version control gives you a way to isolate what you're working on. It's better that everybody has their own development sandbox. That's a conversation for another time. But version control allows you to isolate development and move yourself away from so that you don't have people currently always overwriting your changes and things like that, which can get super frustrating. So that'll allow you to do that. It'll also give you an initial backup of all your metadata. One of those big challenges on the platform is when things do get overwritten, you don't have a version of it to go back to. So that's what version control can give you in terms of a little bit of security from that side of things. Code maintainability. This is all about the quality of the configuration that you are moving through the pipeline. If you are a developer, then code scanning, PMD, check for any security issues, those kind of things is super important. But your code maintainability also pertains to people checking your work. So version control, and no matter what branching strategy you have in version control, you will always have some kind of review process as that code moves through. your deployment pipeline. So that side of things, and having a review process in here is essential to keeping that code quality high, because that's what we don't want to introduce any security risks or any buggy code. So that's something that can be done also quite easily as part of the process as you're looking to set up the other things. If we move down to the bottom left here, so CI/CD, this is the thing that everybody thinks DevOps is, or mostly thinks DevOps is automating everything. And yeah, I see the argument. I get it. Automation is the sexy bit, the move fast. How much can we deploy without having to touch it, and all that kind of stuff, and is largely seen as the utopia. So whilst that is true, and we should all be thinking about moving towards automation, the things that we need to get right in our processes as it pertains to doing things manually, as long as we can do that right manually, then we can look to then automate it. So continuous integration is all about taking those individual features that different team members have been working on, merging them together regularly with what the current version of how things exist are, and then ensure that they can be moved through at any one time. And then see the CD part, so continuous deployment or continuous delivery, depending on who you ask, is just the constant iteration of doing that. The continuous delivery is more about the overarching goal, so being able to deliver at a continual pace. We have automated end-to-end testing as the fifth part here. So this is more about testing that everything that you're building is working. If you have any endpoints, APIs, things like that, things that might break as part of your configuration, and being able to test that on a continual basis is really important. There's a great vendor that we work with, Provar, if anybody's heard of them. They make a fantastic automated testing tool, which I have heard. I haven't used it firsthand myself, but I've heard fantastic things about those guys and what they've been able to do for some of their customers. Even if they've got no testing in the first place in any of this stuff, you can really move towards some fantastic automation around that point to really make sure that what you're deploying isn't going to break something, because that's really not good. That makes people grumpy if that happens. And the last side is the picture here is we always believe that disaster recovery is one of the core pillars of DevOps, is because how can you move faster with confidence if you're not protected if something does go wrong? Because things go wrong, right? Best laid plans and all that. You pack all your stuff in the suitcase, you put your passports on the side, your taxi's booked 5 hours before you're supposed to actually be at the airport, and something will still go wrong. You get a burst tire. Things go wrong, and it's exactly the same in software development and Salesforce development. So having disaster recovery maybe as your first port of call before you even start doing any of this stuff might even be useful at some point. But that side of things really needs to be taken care of, and you need to have something that's tried, tested, and something that you can restore from. So it's not just backing things up. It's not just putting things in Git and version control and having it there. It's all about being able to then actually restore that if something does go wrong, which platform like GearSet or Own Backup or any of those folks are going to be specialists in. So those are kind of the technical things that comprise of a great DevOps process. So talked about one side of the story, second side of the story. So spoken a little bit about this already and some of those challenges a couple of slides ago. But the main challenges that we face as a team and as organizations can be still down to process inertia, which we talked about already. We've always done it this way, and that side of the argument, and communication, which I've already talked about a lot as well. So old habits are hard to break. Teams add in those technological improvements without critically assessing where their difficulties in their process actually are before they do it. They'll go, oh, we'll buy an automation platform, and the automation doesn't fix anything because automation wasn't the problem. How you do things is fundamentally broken. Why would you want to automate a broken process? So really being able to assess where you are right now is super important. And I would even encourage you to, if you are starting your career, moving into a new job or a new organization, it's not just going blind and just go with the status quo and how things are. If things are working fantastically, then you might be like, oh, great, then I've landed on my feet and we're in a fantastic spot right now. If you go in and you have questions, or you have listen to yourself, and if you think things are wrong or could be improved, don't just sit on that. Raise that and bring it up. We're all in this together, and that's one of the biggest things that we preach here at GearSet, and I'm a big fan of as well, is getting everybody there together and really investing in the success of the team. Then communication, we could talk about this all day. I've spoke a little bit earlier about kind of like testing or something breaking, that handover between the dev and the business users. Testing is often, some other department's responsibility, right? So that kind of breakdown could be really detrimental. So having either processes or systems in place that allow teams to communicate effectively across those channels, wherever they might be, means that disruption could be kept to a minimum if things do go wrong. But this is why on that slide with the two diagrams that we had, if everybody's responsible for their own things, each person is responsible for testing their new features themselves at the earliest point before it gets to a dedicated testing team, there's already going to be that confidence that what you're doing is right. So creating a bit of alignment, you're always going to need to communicate in some way, shape, or form. We're not saying you can sack off all your colleagues and never talk to them again. With the Great DevOps process, we're saying that you could, with effective communication, you can make your lives a little bit easier here. And then success. So what does success actually look like? So there's a ton of metrics that you can attribute to DevOps success. If you're interested in more about those after the session and deep dive into that, GearSet's produced a fantastic report earlier this year called the State of Salesforce DevOps 2022, which goes into those metrics a little bit more. So things like your lead time, your cycle time, deployment frequency, recovery time, change failure rate. Those are all metrics associated with the DevOps lifecycle. But ultimately, what we're all about is making this circle move as seamlessly and then as fast as we can. So how long does it take to build things, deploy things, test them, and then release them out to our end users? So success will vary. To some teams, the pinnacle is being able to release 2 or 3 times a day, which is what we do at GearSet in terms of our application. We release it 2 or 3 times a day to our end users and really practice what we preach as a DevOps vendor. But success to other teams might mean that at the end of your 2-week sprint cycle, which is one of the most common, probably the most common way of working that I see in teams, when it comes to the end of that 2-week sprint cycle, that release is ready to go. It's all tested, things happen smoothly, and you're not having things drag over into your next sprint or your next release cycle. So defining what success looks like and thinking about what success looks like to your organization is really important when you think about your end goal. But that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve with our success here. And we spoke about this a little bit earlier when I was chatting with Justin just then. DevOps is a journey. You're never going to be done, I guess, is the point here. DevOps is all about continual improvement and getting those features and functionality out to our end users. Think how many requirements we can't get back from the business. We do a process this way. Next year they might want to tweak or add things. And DevOps is all about that. Is that continual improvement? We currently do things this way. How can we take the first step into improving our process? Do we introduce a tool that helps us to compare things? Do we then look at version control, or then we look to automation? How saying automation isn't the right thing to do straight away, but a lot of people think it is. That's just not the case. That it's always going to be a journey. So assessing that process and how you exist now versus your future state. So current state, future state is something that you should always be thinking about. What do we do right now that we like? What don't we like? And how can we change the thing that we don't like? Same can be applied to a lot of things. So you don't have to be trailblazing deploying a million things a day into production. That just shouldn't be your end goal. That small slices of continual improvement is a great way to approach it, notwithstanding the learning curves that we've already spoken about. So I've been talking for ages about all of this stuff and haven't really given you any reason to do it. So why do it? So to look like this man. So if you're not familiar with who this guy is, it's Pharrell Williams, who, if you have young children like me, are probably more than familiar with the song Happy and Despicable Me. The reason that we invest in these processes is ultimately to make ourselves happy. So I'm so glad Justin is on this call, and he said that he was up till 3 a.m. last night, because it just illustrated this point so well. So many of us have hobbies, long walks, spend time with your kids, watching the baseball, basketball, NFL, whatever it might be. Sometimes Salesforce development can get in the way of that. Justin said it 3 a.m. last night, that he was up till deploying that thing. And the smoother your process is, this sounds really bad on gear set. He was up till 3 a.m. last night and had a problem with deployment.
It wasn't gear set's fault. It was, we have 4 development teams. So like if you just back up a slide, we're kind of in the practitioner phase there, where we're learning, we're in the growing pains of learning how multiple teams check in their changes to the same repository of code, but a page layout or a record type has shared metadata. And so that's what really the challenge we're facing right now. And then we're heading into the 4th of July weekend. So some of the developers who wrote the test classes were unavailable at 3 in the morning. So we just kind of smashed up against a wall of our own fault and doing. Don't blame gear set for that.
Great. So there we go again, illustrating perfectly continual improvement for us as well. Those kind of issues. By the way, Justin, we're releasing incremental page layout deployments soon as well, so that's probably interesting to you. So DevOps can make us happy, and it's not DevOps that makes you happy. It's not the automation platform that makes you happy. It's not the technology. It is genuinely the time that it gives you back to do other things. So I'm sure you've all spent a ton of time playing around in Trailhead sandboxes and taking all of those modules, and learning new things is fun. Actually doing the thing, building the thing is fun. Dealing with all the problems that comes with it when you try and actually give it to people is not so fun. So this is what we're really trying to get back to, is when we found this with a lot of the case studies that we've got with customers. Again, go over to GearSet, we're talking about saving people or reducing the time they spend doing this stuff by 10, 12 times over. Reducing 12-hour deployments to 1-hour deployments is a fairly common scenario for kind of GearSet customers. But this is, again, it's not the tools, it's not the technology. Getting that time back is so valuable, so that you can actually do the things that you want to be doing on your job. You've got a lot of exciting technology out there to learn, with flows and Lightning Web Components or whatever takes your interest. Having a solid process that allows you to focus on doing that is going to be far more fulfilling than battling with change sets, which, if some of you have already done, I am sorry for you. So where can you learn a little bit more? So if you haven't learned enough already, or this has only just piqued your interest and you want to find out a little bit more, you can learn more over at DevOps Launchpad. So this is a platform specifically for DevOps, which is much like Trailhead itself. Take a course, interactive quiz, get a shiny badge, shiny certificate, and away you go. So you've got courses over on DevOps Launchpad, devopslaunchpad.com, and you can see all the courses there. So even things like introduction to Salesforce development, introduce you to Git, introduce you to automation, all those side of things. We have a course on there written by Provar, who I mentioned earlier, about automated testing, teach you about backups, recovery, all that kind of stuff, all of that info is there, and is a really good place to start getting a baseline around some of this stuff. So
If
go
we
check
don't
that
have
out.
if we don't have a background in development, is there a I don't know if you call them trails, but like a module on DevOps Launchpad that can really explain it to me like I'm 5? If I feel like I need to start really basic.
Yep. So introduction to Salesforce development is a course on there. So really beginner stuff should be the best thing for you on there, which I'm sure is a boat that a lot of us are in right now. So yeah, head over there and see what you can do with us. There's obviously gear set. I am big on LinkedIn and Twitter and all those kind of things as well, sharing little tips and tricks and pictures of golf courses, because that's what I do. So follow a bunch of people. If you don't already follow Vanessa, follow Vanessa. Vanessa's on her own DevOps learning path at the moment as well, and is even going to be speaking about it at Tahoe Dreaming if any of you are out that way. So go out into the community. That's my favorite thing about this ecosystem since I joined it, is the community. There's so much to learn out there if you go looking for it. But start with DevOps Launchpad and you can't go too wrong. And of course, feel free to contact me or anybody else at the GearSet team. We can point you in the right direction if we're not the right people for you, depending on what you want answers to. So there endeth my speech.
I want to hear from Vanessa if she's learning this already. Like, what's like the first like aha moment for you, Vanessa, like that helped you start to get DevOps the first time?
Honestly, it was listening to the various webinars. Like it was by some weird fate, I met Jack at a food truck at Ian Gotts's house. He's the guy who runs Elements Cloud. And I was just in my a project that was just going completely sideways, in large part due to deployment issues. I don't know that I ever heard of DevOps before, but by again, going out into the community. So like Capato does events all the time. So I went to, sorry, GearSet. But I went to a Capato slalom event. I ended up getting a copy of Andrew Davis's book, Mastering Salesforce DevOps. That's a great book. It's like, huge, but it's a great reference. I started going to webinars. So Salesforce does a lot of webinars on DevOps. Jack does a lot of webinars on DevOps. Capato does webinars on DevOps. And hearing about the cultural stuff, I think from a business standpoint, being more of an operations person, hearing about the culture challenges and how I can impact culture was really where it spoke to me. The technology stuff is still a little bit challenging for me, but that I can still affect change by focusing on the process stuff. That's where in my future projects, I keep in mind, okay, this is a conversation that we need to have like way before UAT, way before we need to deploy to the final environment. We need to have that conversation really early and figure out what this process is going to look like and make sure everybody's on the same page, make sure it's written out. And those are things that I can help with. So that's kind of where it stuck with me. And I'm just going to say, Jack, don't be embarrassed. You're speaking with me at Tahoe, okay? So it's not just me speaking at Tahoe. Like Jack's going to be there. If nobody wants to hear me on a stage speaking about DevOps, okay?
You have all the war stories, Vanessa, which are far more interesting than what I have to say. So cool. If anybody has any questions, Jen, I'm right here.
Do you have any good stories, Jack?
What kind of stories?
Well, no, I mean, you've worked with
DevOps related stories.
like what's some major change that you've seen like with a company with, without necessarily naming names? Like tell us a good story.
Yeah, so if we go back to if we head back to the main point that I was making at the end there about us all being Pharrell and happy, I was working with a customer. She was a lone admin in an org which had about 400 users or so, and they had a process by which every single Friday they had to have like the deliverables met for what they were doing, and they had a CPQ implementation which was implemented by a consultant, and then left with the admin. They should have had more staff. Ultimately, is the crux of it. But every single Friday she had to do a release, and pretty much every Friday you're talking about 10, 11 p.m. at night kind of thing. And working with her, this is going to sound like a GearSet plug because it kind of is, but by introducing her to GearSet and helping her on that journey in a better way of managing that life cycle, and the amount of things that we could put into our hands in terms of being able to pre-approve things and be able to better communicate with the business and what they wanted, she was able to finish at 5 o'clock every Friday instead. And you know, that's pretty common, whether that's a single admin team or a large developer team, big enterprise organization team. If anybody here it does work in a large enterprise or ends up working in a large enterprise, like, or a team kind of just in size with 4 different kind of development streams, you're gonna have a late night at some point. Like, it's unavoidable. But reducing those late nights is actually something that we see pretty much every time a customer picks up GearSet or engages us.
As much as I came today with a war story of a late night, it's the second time in 3 years. Second. So what? 36 deployments once a month. Only 2 out of 36 have gone past like 1 a.m. So like, it did absolutely reduce hours of deployment. Your story, I can piggyback on that story. I want to share my perspective of that kind of lone admin's lens on it. I'm on a team of 40. So on a large enterprise using GearSet or using these DevOps principles, we have to break our deployment planning into the stuff we do in the org before we use GearSet. Then we push a bunch of stuff with our package in GearSet, and then we have post-deployment steps that are manual. So it's like manual, push a button, manual, because that's what GearSet's like. But the dream is to find all these configurations, every checkbox, every new field, every new flow, all these different metadata components, and assemble them together in a package. If we can find 100% of them, every single thing on the back end, and package that up, we don't need pre-steps or post-steps anymore. And there was a deployment last summer, I think, where I was kind of like that solo admin again, where it was just this one change that leadership had approved as a off schedule release. We don't have to wait, for the next monthly release. There was enough business reason for this to go into production immediately. But it was like one single component I had to push, right? Just like, these are those times as an admin, you're like, I could literally log in, go to setup and press the button faster. But you know what? We've got a process now. We got to follow it, right? So anyway, in GearSet, I saw your little feature for schedule later. And I'm like, schedule for 9 p.m., our deployment window. Okay, I'm gonna try this for the first time. And so sure enough, I log in at 9:01 p.m. I get a little email from GearSet, says, we've deployed your change, that one single thing. I log into the org and say, yep, I see it. I log back out, send an email to the team, deployment successful. I didn't do nothing. I scheduled that at 4 p.m. I went and had dinner. I went and did other things, just like your story described. You know, it all comes down to if you trust the process and the tools you've been practicing with. And it was because I'd done 20 deployments before. I finally had that faith that, well, let me see if this feature works. Schedule for 9 p.m. I literally just came in to verify changes then at that point, not actually deploy them. Does that make sense?
Makes a ton of sense.
Now, if I could just get every deployment like that, but not when you got 500 components to deploy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like my client, they use a competitor, Kabato, but I can't imagine what
it's fine. We're not that good. Not that good. I'm not that precious.
I can't imagine how crazy it would be if they didn't have anything in place, because we have like 26 different Salesforce teams. So it's really organized. I mean, if like there wasn't anything in place, that everybody would be running around with their like heads cut off, or it'd just be a complete mess. I mean, there's still issues now, but DevOps really helps. It really helps having a team dedicated to that process.
So this brings up a great, Anita, you just inspired me there, because this brings up a really great topic. How do, like, think like Jeff Foxworthy, like you might be a DevOps pro if, right? Let's fill in that blank here together. There's a discussion. If you open the Lego manual to build a new Lego set, and you are more fascinated with how the pictures color coded some Lego bricks that are coming up next, because those are going to be the different Legos for the next page. If you were like blown away when they made that change in Lego manual writing, you might be a great DevOps expert, because that's exactly what management of DevOps is what's different. When am I going to push it in, right? Like that color coded, different colored Lego brick on the picture. I'm about to run to my living room and grab you a manual just to show you this. But other example is orchestration. Maybe you took like the Myers-Briggs and you got like Field Marshal, INTJ, or one of those other ones that's like large complex orchestration or sequencing of events. That's where we play in DevOps. That is every day, all day. You will spend 19 hours just building a diagram of your process to share out with your other developers, 10 or 20 developers, and say, this is our new process. And then you'll discuss that for an hour. And then you'll take the diagram back and make adjustments based on feedback from the team and do it again and again, and keep refining that process until it's like a well-oiled machine and it's working well. That's the moment of inspiration there from Anita, talking about you've got that planning figured out. There's somebody picturing that plan in their mind every day. That's orchestrating a DevOps process. Anyone got any other ideas about you might be a good DevOps person if?
To be fair, most of the people here are like brand new. It didn't even click to me that my client, like what DevOps was. I just kept hearing it from Vanessa a while. And then just recently I was like, oh, my client does this. That's what it is. So if you're brand new and this sounds like really foreign to you, don't feel bad. You will learn about it more as you get in, especially the bigger companies.
Yeah, and actually, I'll just add, DevOps is starting to permeate really every role in Salesforce. Like even as part of this BA certification, like version control is on the exam guide. Being able to follow a user story until it gets to production. So if there's any challenges, it goes back to that original user story. Like that's all. BAs aren't just going to be focused on discovery anymore. There's actually going to be part of the entire implementation lifecycle. So this is a hot topic that everybody should at least be familiar with, for sure.
I want to dispel a myth too, Vanessa. Like it is a very good skill at an entry level too. Now, I don't know if the employers would agree with me, but I would now that I've learned it for 2.5 years, because you get presented the backend code, like in an XML file or lines of field values, and listed out in the back end. And then you start to see the comparison, red versus green coming out, going in. This is going to be deleted. This is going to be entered in new. Those are called differences. And I got to say, like, it was kind of eye-opening to see the back end of Salesforce in that manner. And so without building anything, you become a reviewer quickly in the DevOps role or positions. So like maybe you get a contract or something like that. And so as you review these changes with the developers who did do the building, it's a really great way to like build a strong foundation, because like you didn't have to make the flow. You didn't have to make the new page layout. But when you start your journey into this career by looking at that back end first, it like really kind of makes sense quickly. I think it does, at least, to then go in and get hands-on again and become an admin or a developer and start building those same solutions that you've been watching your team develop and check in through that version controlling. Honestly, it's a pathway in. I think it is, at least.
It's it really is a fascinating topic, and like Vanessa says, it's permeating, becoming huge now, and it's becoming huge into a way where if you wanted to, like if you were really interested, you know, Justin's Lego analogy, or I think the one that would resonate with me is my sons like to build toy train tracks, and like, you know, those things of like we spend hours building toy train tracks. You know, if you're the kind of person that likes the idea of building something that has multiple streams, and you know, how do things not crash into each other, and you know, that type of mind, you can now literally make whole careers out of the Salesforce DevOps space. If anybody in the room has plans of becoming an architect or anything along those lines, these are kind of the big picture problems that you're going to be solving. You know, DevOps and development lifecycle is like a part of the CTA review board, and you know, all those kind of things. And Salesforce's customer base is growing. It is getting bigger. Their customers are getting bigger. Yeah, sure, they've got the Amazons, they've got the Googles, they've got all of that, but there's becoming more of them. What's their market share figure at the moment? What, like 27% on that slide that Benioff's always showing? 27% of the CRM market. You know, they're going up. So if you want to nerd out on this stuff, like, it is a nerdy topic, like, but what isn't in Salesforce, right? You can nerd out over like pretty much anything. I'd really encourage you to have a look at it, and if you are considering organizations to work for, going through interview processes and all that kind of stuff, kind of ask them what their actual development process looks like. Ask what their DevOps process looks like, and if they give you a great solid answer about how things work, then it might just be one of the better places out there.
Got to underline what you just said, Jack. I got to underline it. Everyone on this call is worried about getting hit in an interview with a question about DevOps, and they've never had a chance to log into GearSet or Capado or any of these. Maybe you've watched a demo on YouTube. It's really common to feel this like imposter, like, oh, I don't know it. Jack just said it. I'm going to repeat it. Ask questions instead in the job interview. Learn what they're already doing. Don't focus on what you don't know. They're going to have to teach you their process anyway. Even with my 3 years experience, if I stepped into a new org today, I would be asking questions because I don't know their process. I don't know what they've decided as a team works best for their org. So my knowledge might not be that valuable to them as much as my curiosity to understand theirs.
In a previous life before DevOps, I was a recruiter as well. So I sat on that side of the table, and as a standout bit of advice, ask the questions. It's a two-way street. An interview is a two-way street for sure. So
yeah,
I think we're 3 minutes over, aren't we? So
yes, I was just about to close up. Thank you so much for coming on. That was really informative. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Vanessa and Justin, for helping co-host.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Bye, guys.